They say parenting does not come with a handbook. I did not know how true this statement was until my journey began. First, I would like to start by saying I was blessed to have raised two unique and wonderful young men, but who are different in their own way. I have one that I have just sent off to college to become a mechanical engineer, and I have one that just needed a little bit of extra special love and care and support. So I will take you back with me 11 years ago. My younger son was diagnosed with an initial diagnosis of oppositional defiant disorder and ADHD in 2012. He would later go on to be diagnosed with DMDD, which stands for Disruptive Mood Dysregulation Disorder. The definition of DMDD is children with severe and frequent temper tantrums that affect their daily activities at school, with friends, and at home. My son was about 3 years old when I noticed something was a little bit off with his mood. He would wake up irritable, upset, and just mad for no reason. I was concerned, but I just assumed that this was something that would work itself out. And honestly, I did not read a lot into the situation. I got a job at a local hotel and was a front desk clerk, which operated 24/7. And at the time, my younger son was in daycare. It seemed almost every day I was receiving a call to come to the daycare because my son was having severe temper tantrums. I would get to the center, and he would be calm, but the teachers would begin to describe the behaviors they seen, such as eloping out of the classroom, turning over trash cans that were taller than him, running into the bathroom, tearing up tile, and being aggressive with the other children. These descriptions of my son's behavior had me defensive. I was embarrassed. I was in disbelief. I just knew that they were not telling the truth. I was fearful of what was happening, but could not quite understand why this was happening to me. I always asked lots of questions about the incidents, but over the next several months, these calls came every day, sometimes 2 to 3 times a day. Just to further let you know, I was not in a position where I could constantly leave my job, but I pushed to be allowed to go and support the center no matter what. So not only was I defensive in learning that my son was not acting right in school, I was also constantly in fear that I was going to lose my job because me leaving all the time caused tension. But my coworkers were supportive to a certain extent. The behaviors became constant, so it affected my work and basically how they viewed me as a person. I was always a sensitive person anyway, but the more I had to go and support my son in school, the more defensive and helpless I became. Whenever I had to go to management and ask to leave, I felt bad because I felt like I was not carrying my weight. My ability to be at work was a problem, and I felt so helpless because I was trying to figure out how to support my son while trying to keep my head above water and still go to work and smile. I can remember me breaking down and just sobbing for hours trying to understand what was happening. At this point, I knew something was wrong, but I chose to ignore. I was in constant contact with family and friends, and everybody had an opinion about what I needed to do and how I needed to do it. And it was just overwhelming. I would call and ask for advice, but when I did not like the advice, I would become argumentative and defensive and try to explain why I didn't want to take the advice. These days were dark, and I felt really down on myself, but I kept pushing on. Toward the end of my son's daycare years, I spoke with the director. She pulled me to the side and said, "Ms. McKinnon, we love you. We love your son. We've loved having him here these years, but you're going to have a problem when you get to public schools. 0 tolerance. He's not going to really survive." This statement would ring true to me the following year. As my son entered kindergarten, the difficulties he was having was becoming more and more clear. I got my first call, and the teacher claimed he did not want to participate, and he thought the class was laughing at him. So he acted like he was shooting the class, and he was suspended for 2 days for 0 tolerance. I was devastated. I was so unsure of what I needed to do, and they suggested looking into getting an IEP for my son, which is an individualized education program. The day my world completely changed was when I got the call from the school stating my son had hit a parent with a backpack in the hall. I was devastated. I was like, what do you mean? I just could not understand why this was happening to me. Why me? And I kept asking God, why me? And what is going on right now? I rushed to the school in a panic, and all I could say was, oh my God, something has got to give. I went to the office and spoke with the principal in total disbelief that he had actually hit an adult with a backpack. I looked at my son and asked, why did you do this? He just shrugged his shoulders with such an innocent look and said, I don't know. I felt like, how can you not know? Like, why do you not know? And I asked again, like, why do you not know? Same look. He looked at me and said, I don't know. At this moment in time, I knew this was seriously not normal. So I told myself, I've got to figure out what I needed to do. I knew that I was operating in a world unknown, but when I looked at my baby, I knew I had to fight. I had to fight for his rights. I had to fight for him a free and fair and appropriate education. I was desperate to find a solution that worked right now. I wanted this to end right now. I wanted to make whatever my son was going through go away right now. I did not want to hear another description of the behaviors my son was having because I just knew there had to be a resolution. Over the next several years, the challenges and struggles would prove extensive. My journey started at Centerstone, but it did not end there. I sought out professional counseling for myself and my son. I enrolled in parenting classes. I tried youth groups. I enlisted several agencies to help support me in school, in the school setting, and I had him tested in every avenue you could think of. As I am in the midst of trying to get all the resources in place for my son, I was still getting calls. He was still having outbursts. He was then 7 years old, and now he was getting arrested for his behaviors, such as refusing to go to class or cursing at teachers. And I could not believe or understand why my child was even arrested when he had a diagnosable mental health illness. He was receiving bruises and contusions. And I kept telling others and documenting, but I could never get full support from the school. I felt like they were brushing us out the door, and I also felt like, why are you arresting my son when there are kids that are bringing weapons to school and still in school? It made no sense to me, but I continued to ask questions. But the behaviors and the struggles continued. I felt so useless. I felt like I was not a good mother. I felt like I was failing my son. I would literally go to work in the morning and look at other children on the bus stop, and I would see other children and not have a clue what was going on with them or what struggles they may be facing. And I always thought those parents are so lucky to be able to go to work and not get a single call, not have to leave their jobs. It didn't affect their livelihood. And I just thought they were so lucky. But I also knew these kids were not my kid. And I needed to focus on making sure he is set up for success and not slip through the cracks of a system that did not understand my child had an alternative learning style. I can remember going into the meeting with administrators and educators so defensive. And I wrote down everything. I wanted a copy of anything I signed, and I demanded we go over and over what his needs were. I often refer to myself as the three-headed beast who loved her baby and wanted him treated just like everyone else, even though he was designed differently. I carried around 4 to 5 backpacks in my trunk, still unbelievable, of so many documents and discipline reports and papers and IEP plans and handbooks and resources. of who I talked to and what we talked about. My determination grew stronger when people told me that we could not do this or we could not do that, or he didn't qualify for this or he didn't qualify for that. I said, okay, let me try something different. I'm going to find somebody who will help us and what he can qualify for. So I had to push a few doors and knock a whole lot of walls down to get things done, but I did. I was not going to let society or anyone tell me my child was less than. I knew he was something special. I had countless people tell me how wonderful my son was, how helpful and determined he was, how kind and gentle he could be, how remorseful he was after every incident, how he was apologetic when he calmed down, how he was smart and intelligent when he was focused, how he was also a great athlete. He had a passion for baseball at a young age, and I just made sure he stayed in baseball to have an outlet. Now, did I want to remove him at times? Yes. I felt that I was rewarding him for his bad behaviors. And I would constantly get support from people around me who said he needs an outlet. Please let him play. And I did. I think him being on that field is something he looks forward to. And all the stigma and the disappointment went away because he could prove he was great at something. And it made me proud to be able to congratulate him on something that had nothing to do with school or schoolwork. I am just now starting to see all the hard work pay off and breathe just by being able to stand up here and tell you guys my story. He has seemed to become more stable, but we have our ups and downs, as I like to call them, setbacks. And it can be overwhelming at times. I do become frustrated knowing that this may be a lifelong battle that we have to deal with. But I always tell both of my boys, nothing or no one can stop what God has for you. So no matter how my son is designed, he will shine. Thank you.